Albert Camus wrote The Rebel not as a political manifesto, but as a moral warning. He had watched the 20th century tear itself apart in the name of ideas. Revolutions promised justice. Ideologies promised redemption. And everywhere Camus looked, he saw the same pattern. Human beings were being sacrificed to abstractions. The Rebel is his attempt to understand how this happens. Camus begins with a simple question. Why does a person rebel? Rebellion is not the same as revolution. A rebel is someone who says no to injustice. They draw a line and refuse to cross it. Rebellion begins with a recognition of dignity. A person who rebels believes that something in them deserves respect. Even if they are powerless, they refuse to accept humiliation. This first act of rebellion is deeply human. It is not ideological, it is personal. A slave who refuses a beating, a worker who refuses exploitation, a person who refuses to be treated as less than human. All of these acts are rebellions. They do not seek to destroy the world, they seek to be seen within it. Camus believed that this original rebellion is rooted in solidarity. When a person rebels, they do so not only for themselves, but for others who share their condition. The rebel says, "This is not acceptable for anyone." But something dangerous happens when rebellion becomes revolution. A revolution is not satisfied with saying no. It wants to build a new world. It wants to replace injustice with justice, suffering with happiness, chaos with order. This desire is understandable, but when it becomes absolute, it changes the moral structure of rebellion. Revolutions do not ask whether violence is justified. They ask whether it is necessary. Camus had seen what happens when necessity replaces dignity. In the name of the future, people become expendable. Lives become numbers. Killing becomes a tool. This is the moment when rebellion turns into murder. Camus traces this transformation through history. He shows how modern revolutions inherited the structure of religious thinking. In the past, God promised salvation. In the modern world, history took God's place. Instead of heaven, people were promised utopia. Instead of divine judgment, there was historical inevitability. But the logic remained the same. Suffering in the present could be justified by redemption in the future. Camus rejected this with everything he had. He believed that no future, no matter how beautiful, could justify killing a human being now. When a revolution demands death in the name of justice, it becomes unjust. This is where Camus' philosophy becomes radical. He does not oppose injustice, he opposes absolute justice. Absolute justice leaves no room for mercy. It demands total purity. And in the real world, total purity means blood. Camus believed that a moral world must be built on limits. There are things that must not be done, even in the name of good. Murder is one of them. Revolutions refuse limits. They believe that if the goal is noble enough, any means can be used. Camus called this metaphysical rebellion, a rebellion not only against injustice, but against the very structure of reality. It is the desire to remake the world entirely. This desire, Camus argued, is what turns rebels into executioners. The 20th century was full of people who believed they were serving humanity while destroying it. They were not monsters. They were believers. They believed in history. They believed in progress. They believed in the future, and because they believed, they were willing to kill. Camus refused this faith. He believed that human dignity exists now, not in some imagined tomorrow. To sacrifice people to a future is to deny their humanity. The Rebel is Camus' attempt to defend a different kind of revolt, a revolt that refuses injustice, but also refuses murder. A revolt that says no to oppression, but also no to the logic that justifies it. This is why Camus was attacked by his former allies. Sartre and the existentialists believed that Camus was naive. They believed that history demanded violence. Camus replied that history demands nothing. It is people who demand and people who kill. Camus' rebellion is not passive, it is demanding. It asks people to resist injustice without becoming unjust. It asks them to fight without becoming killers. This is not easy. It is much easier to believe in a future that excuses everything. But Camus believed that when you accept that logic, you have already lost your humanity. To understand why revolutions so often turn violent, Camus examines what happens when people lose faith in traditional meaning. When God dies, the old moral order collapses. This creates a vacuum. Human beings still hunger for meaning, justice, and certainty. If they cannot find it in religion, they will seek it in ideology. Modern revolutions are built on this hunger. Camus traces how metaphysical rebellion emerges when people reject the world as it is and demand that it becomes something else. They do not simply oppose injustice, they reject the limits of existence itself. Suffering, death, inequality. These are no longer tragic facts of life. They become crimes committed by reality. Once the world is seen as guilty, someone must be blamed. This is how ideologies are born. They promise to explain everything. They offer a vision of total justice. They divide the world into good and evil, pure and corrupt. And once these divisions are accepted, violence becomes logical. Camus shows how nihilism lies at the heart of this process. When people lose faith in transcendent values, they do not stop believing. They change what they believe in. Instead of God, they worship history, race, class, or the nation. These become new absolutes, and like all absolutes, they demand sacrifice. Revolutionary violence is not random, it is ritual. People are killed not because they are dangerous, but because they represent something that must be destroyed. A bourgeois, a traitor, an enemy of the people. These labels turn human beings into symbols, and once someone becomes a symbol, killing them feels justified. Camus believed this was the great crime of modern ideology. It replaces human faces with abstract categories. This is why he insisted that rebellion must always remember its origin. The individual human being who says no to humiliation. When rebellion forgets this, it becomes tyranny. Revolutions promise freedom, but when they demand absolute loyalty, they create new chains. When they claim to know the direction of history, they silence anyone who disagrees. Dissent becomes treason, doubt becomes guilt. Camus had seen this in the Soviet Union. He had seen how revolutionary ideals were used to justify prisons, purges, and executions. He did not deny that capitalism was unjust. He denied that injustice could be cured by murder. This was the point where Camus and Sartre finally split. Sartre believed that history required taking sides. Camus believed that history was not a god. It did not give orders. It did not justify killing. To say that violence is necessary is to stop thinking morally. It is to surrender to inevitability. Camus refused to surrender. He believed that human beings must choose limits even when there is no guarantee that those limits will lead to victory. This is the tragedy of revolt. You may lose, but you do not become what you fight. This idea is deeply uncomfortable. It offers no redemption. It offers no assurance that justice will triumph. It only offers the possibility of staying human. Camus thought this was enough. Camus's central question in The Rebel is not whether injustice should be resisted. It is how resistance can remain moral when the world itself offers no moral guarantees. Once people abandon God, once history loses its providential meaning, and once absolute truth disappears, what prevents rebellion from becoming cruelty? Camus' answer is limits. True rebellion, he argues, is born from a sense of shared dignity. A rebel does not say, "I am everything and you are nothing." The rebel says, "There is something in me that must not be violated, and that same something exists in you." Rebellion is therefore an act of solidarity. It affirms that there are lines that should not be crossed. Revolution destroys these lines. When rebellion becomes metaphysical, when it aims not just to correct injustice but to remake the world, It loses its grounding in human experience. It becomes obsessed with purity, with final solutions, with total transformation. At that point, people no longer matter as people. They matter only as instruments. Camus believed this was the deepest danger of modern political movements. They promise to create heaven on earth. And because heaven is perfect, anything that threatens it must be eliminated. This is why revolutions become murderous. They do not start by hating people. They start by loving an idea too much. Camus insisted that morality cannot survive this kind of love. To love an abstraction more than a living person is already a form of cruelty. A philosophy that justifies killing in the name of justice is not moral. It is theological. It simply replaces God with ideology. Camus called this the metaphysics of murder. Once a revolution declares that its goal is absolute, every obstacle becomes a crime. Every dissenter becomes an enemy. The logic is relentless. To hesitate is to betray the future. To doubt is to be complicit in injustice. Violence becomes not only acceptable, but required. Camus saw this in the terror of the French Revolution. He saw it in Stalin's purges. He saw it in every movement that believed history was on its side. Against this, Camus proposed a rebellion that refuses absolutes, a rebellion that knows it may fail, a rebellion that accepts the tragic limits of human action. This does not mean accepting injustice. It means refusing to become unjust while fighting it. Camus believed that human beings must choose a middle path between resignation and fanaticism. To accept suffering without protest is to become complicit. To destroy in the name of ending suffering is to become a tyrant. True rebellion walks between these extremes. This is why Camus insisted that rebellion must always say both no and yes. It says no to oppression, and it says yes to human life. This double commitment is what makes rebellion moral. A rebel who says only no becomes a destroyer. A rebel who says only yes becomes a dreamer. Camus wanted a rebellion that could do both. He knew this would be misunderstood. Many of his contemporaries accused him of being soft, of lacking courage, of refusing to choose sides. Camus replied that the courage to kill is cheap. The courage to refuse killing in a violent world is rare. To choose limits is not weakness. It is fidelity to humanity. Camus believed that a world without God does not become meaningless. It becomes fragile. And fragile things require care. Revolutionary ideology treats human beings as raw material. Absurd rebellion treats them as ends. This is why Camus' thought remains so unsettling. It refuses the comfort of righteous violence. It refuses the intoxication of historical destiny. It leaves us with a difficult truth that we are responsible for the suffering we cause, even when we believe we are right. There is no future that washes blood from the hands. In the end, Camus did not believe that history could be saved. He believed that people could be saved from history. In the final movement of The Rebel, Camus turns away from history and ideology and back toward the individual human being. He does not offer a system. He offers a stance. In a world that has lost all transcendent meaning, he asks how a person can live without becoming either a victim or a killer. His answer is a rebellion that is always conscious of its own limits. Camus believed that the greatest temptation in a meaningless world is to turn suffering into a justification for cruelty. When there is no God and no ultimate justice, people are tempted to create their own by force. This is how utopias are built on graves. Against this, Camus proposed a form of revolt that remains loyal to the present. It does not sacrifice living people to imagined futures. It does not demand purity. It does not seek total victory. It seeks dignity. This dignity is fragile. It must be chosen again and again. Every act of rebellion carries the risk of becoming something else. To fight injustice is always to flirt with hatred. To resist oppression is always to risk becoming oppressive. Camus does not pretend this is easy. He insists that it is tragic, but tragedy is not an excuse for murder. He believed that moral life in an absurd world is not about achieving perfection. It is about refusing to cross certain lines. It is about saying, even here, even now, even when everything is unjust, there are things I will not do. This is the true rebellion. Camus knew that this position would never satisfy those who want total solutions. It offers no guarantee that justice will triumph. It offers no comfort that history is moving in the right direction. It offers only the possibility of staying human in an inhuman world. For Camus, that was enough. This is why The Rebel was so controversial. It challenged not only fascism, but every ideology that claimed the right to kill for a cause. It challenged the belief that suffering can be redeemed by the future. It challenged the idea that being right gives you permission to be cruel. Camus did not deny that the world is unjust. He denied that injustice gives us the right to become executioners. In a century that saw more death than any before it, this was a radical claim. Camus believed that if humanity is to survive, it will not be because we discovered the perfect system. It will be because we learned how to set limits on our own violence. Rebellion, in his sense, is not about winning. It is about refusing to let the world turn you into something monstrous. And that is why Camus' philosophy remains so necessary. In every generation, new ideas promise to fix everything. In every generation, those ideas demand sacrifices. Camus stands as a voice that says, no future is worth a human life. In the end, The Rebel is not a book about politics. It is a book about conscience. It asks whether we can say no to injustice without saying yes to murder. Camus believed we must.